The case of Christy Sean and Joseph Codd. Why did a friend eliminate an entire family? Have you ever pondered how well you truly know your friends, colleagues, or neighbors, and how much you can trust these individuals? Typically, friends know everything about us, but occasionally, people who only pretend to be our friends and gain our trust might later exploit our vulnerabilities if they wish to betray or harm us. For most people, friendship is one of those elements that bring meaning to life. Thus, supporting and assisting a friend is paramount. But sometimes the intent to help can turn into a tragedy. The tragic loss of a young woman named Christy Sean and her husband Joseph Codd in 2015 shocked the quiet provincial town of Leicester, North Carolina. This incident was among the loudest and most brutal crimes in the history of this small community. At the time of the tragedy, the couple was joyously anticipating the addition of a new family member. However, the most horrifying aspect was that their perpetrator was someone they knew well, trusted, and considered a friend. Furthermore, they were not his only victims. Early life of Christy Sean. Christy Maria Sean Codd was born on September 3, 1976, in Madrid, Spain, and was the only child of American military personnel. Her father was a U.S. Air Force soldier, and due to his duties, he frequently moved from place to place with his wife and daughter following. The family did not stay long in Spain, and over the next few years they lived in various European countries before returning to the United States. The girl began her schooling in New Orleans, Louisiana, but within a year, the family moved to Texas, then to Illinois, and after that, Sean spent several years in Latin American countries. Such a nomadic lifestyle had its benefits, as Christy spoke multiple languages from an early age and had the opportunity to experience the cultures and traditions of other countries. However, during her teenage years, she faced challenges in settling into new groups and making friends in new places. Just as she would start to settle in, it was time to pack up, move, and change schools and social circles. Yet, it was precisely because of the constant changes that she developed excellent communication skills. Christy easily found common ground with various people, and was known as a sweet, sociable, and charming young woman. Additionally, from an early age, she actively participated in sports, including gymnastics and swimming, and for some time, she took kickboxing classes. When Christy finished school, her father retired from the military, and the family settled in Biloxi, Mississippi. There, she finally made real friends and discovered a new hobby: cooking. The teenager enjoyed preparing various dishes, experimented a lot in the kitchen, and her culinary masterpieces indeed deserved attention and praise. Eventually, she decided to pursue further development in this area and completed culinary courses. Her parents thought she would become a professional chef, but unexpectedly, she also discovered her talent for acting. Actress and culinary TV star. A beautiful and ambitious young woman, brimming with talent, enrolled in an acting academy and moved to Los Angeles. There, broad prospects opened before her, and she intelligently seized every opportunity to make her mark. Christy appeared in commercials, performed on the theater stage, and also took part in some high-profile Hollywood productions as an extra or stunt performer. Specifically, she had a minor role in the Terminator franchise, performing quite risky stunts. In 2000, the young woman graduated from the academy, but by that time, she had not landed any significant or notable roles, despite her striking appearance and evident talent. She then decided to focus on her culinary skills, and also on sports, turning these two passions into a quite profitable business. Christy participated in several popular culinary TV shows which made her well known, turning her into a popular and recognizable figure. She made it to the finals of one season of The Next Food Network Star. But unfortunately, the blonde did not win, as the judges had mixed reviews of her culinary experiments. However, Sean was not greatly dismayed, as she managed to attract considerable attention to herself. Thousands of people followed her on social media, keeping up with her life and creations. She actively promoted a healthy lifestyle, gave advice on proper nutrition, and even developed her own exercise routines to maintain good physical condition. About a year later, Christy founded and began successfully developing her own catering company, which provided banquet services for various events and also retailed prepared culinary products. Her business was distinctive in that it focused on proper and healthy eating. And additionally, The menu featured her own original recipes, which she created and perfected. Soon, the young woman contemplated starting her own farm, which would grow healthy and environmentally friendly produce. This would help her expand her business in the catering industry. At the same time, she conducted online courses on proper nutrition and developed several other projects. Fateful encounter on TV. In 2012, Christy met Joseph Timothy Codd, better known as JT, who worked as a casting director in television, responsible for selecting participants and actors for various high-rated projects. They first met at a studio in Los Angeles, at the casting for a culinary show that the young woman wanted to participate in, and they instantly clicked. Joseph was nearly 7 years older than Christy, had been married before but was in the process of divorcing at the time they met. He was utterly charmed by the beauty and charisma of this delightful blonde, and he began to court her. The young woman was not averse to his attentions, and soon they began a romantic relationship. Joseph shared and supported the ideas of his beloved, and together they began to work on the project of their own farm. Soon after, the couple decided to leave Los Angeles and moved from sunny California to North Carolina. They sold Christy's quite successful and well-established catering business. Joseph sold his house in Hollywood, and they invested all the proceeds in buying a large piece of land in the town of Leicester. The couple acquired a spacious and cozy house, as well as a nearly 1-acre plot of land to realize their dream. The man continued to collaborate with TV channels, but now worked remotely, while the woman actively worked on developing her personal blog about proper nutrition and a healthy lifestyle. They were an ideal couple, with their relationship marked by love and harmony. Soon, the lovebirds decided to formalize their relationship, and in August 2014, they had a lavish wedding attended by several hundred guests, including relatives, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and even some fans of the famous couple. They were truly happy and full of plans for their future together. 3 months after the wedding, the newlyweds learned that they were going to become parents for the first time. Their joy knew no bounds. After the new year, during a routine ultrasound examination, the doctor told the couple that they were expecting a daughter, and a few days later, during a phone call with her mother, Christy mentioned that they had decided to name their firstborn Skylar. Everything was going perfectly, and the pregnancy was progressing smoothly, but the couple's happiness was tragically short-lived. The mysterious disappearance of the Codds. Christy was 5 months pregnant, and actively preparing for the arrival of their baby. She almost daily called her parents, who lived in another state, sharing updates on her well-being and chatting with her mother, sometimes for an hour at a time. However, on March 13, 2015, Christy's mother was unable to reach her daughter, but initially did not think much of it. The situation repeated the next day. Calls went through, but no one answered. Her son-in-law's phone also went unanswered. When by March 15th, both spouses' phones were turned off, Christy's mother became alarmed. Since Christy and Joseph's parents lived in other states, they couldn't quickly check on their children's home to ensure everything was all right. Therefore, Christy's mother called a close friend of her daughter, a woman named Cecily, who lived nearby and could check on them at their home. When the friend arrived at the Codd residence, she saw that both spouses' personal cars were parked at the house. However, the front door was locked, and no one responded to knocks and shouts. The couple's phones had been off for 3 days, which was also highly suspicious. Through a window, Cecily saw that the couple's beloved dogs, who they cherished and would never willingly leave alone, were locked inside one of the rooms. The woman decided to walk around the house and noticed that the back door lock had been forcefully broken, indicating that someone had attempted to enter, or had indeed entered, the home. She immediately informed Christy's mother by phone, who then promptly called the police. The responding officers confirmed that the back door had been broken into and discovered disarray inside, indicating that someone had been searching for something. According to the family, some valuables had been stolen, including a jewelry box belonging to the homeowner, and a safe in the couple's bedroom had been breached. However, there were no signs of blood, struggle, or evidence that the couple had been detained or taken by force. Additionally, the perpetrator had acted very cautiously, leaving no fingerprints or DNA traces. The relatives clung to the faint hope that 45-year-old Joseph and his 38-year-old pregnant wife Christy were still alive, but the experienced officers were not optimistic in their forecasts. Suspicious neighbor. In the initial days, the investigation simply stalled. No clues or even somewhat significant evidence could be found. The missing couple had no enemies or ill-wishers, and reconstructing what had happened was challenging even in broad strokes. The spouses' phones were left at home, last used on March 12th. Only incoming calls were recorded the next day, after which the devices died. The police decided to question the couple's neighbors to see if they had noticed anything strange or suspicious recently. An interesting detail emerged. A neighbor living across the street saw another local resident throwing a large bundle into a trash bin near the Codd's home on the morning of March 15th. At the time, he didn't think much of it. But when he learned of the couple's disappearance, he thought the information might be useful to the investigation. Checking the contents of the bins was no longer possible, as the trash had been taken to the dump just the day before, and now any potential evidence would need to be searched for there. But first, the police wanted to speak with the person who had discarded the strange bundle. He turned out to be a 36-year-old Robert Jason Owens, who lived on the same street, was well acquainted with the couple, and even considered a close family friend. Robert was a handyman and had helped Christy and Joseph when they first moved into their new home. They became friends, and later the couple invited their new friend and neighbor to their own wedding. At first glance, there was nothing suspicious about this, except that other locals described Owens as a strange and unpredictable person. Horrific discovery and shocking confessions. On March 16th, Robert was summoned to the police station for questioning, initially denying any involvement in the couple's disappearance and claiming ignorance about the bundle mentioned. There wasn't much to charge him with initially, beyond the unsubstantiated claims of another neighbor. However, that evening, the situation dramatically changed after the very same large, strange bundle was found at the landfill. Inside were items from the missing couple's home, including Robert's clear fingerprints and DNA traces found on partially burnt clothing belonging to the couple, a blanket, and a throw from their home, all stained with blood. This evidence confirmed police suspicions that Christy and Joseph were no longer alive. Doubts were dispelled when police searched the suspect's home and found charred human skeletal remains in his wood stove. Robert was then brought in as a suspect in the brutal elimination of his neighbor and the neighbor's pregnant wife. Despite his denials and inconsistent statements, he eventually confessed after several hours, and his admissions were truly shocking. He admitted to the double fatal incident but claimed it was accidental. According to him, on the evening of March 12th, he decided to visit his friend's home but swerved off the road to avoid hitting a dog, getting stuck in the mud. He walked to the Codd's home and asked for help to push his car out. The helpful and responsive couple agreed to assist, and while they were pushing the car, Robert, sitting at the wheel, accidentally confused the gas and brake pedals, striking and running over the couple. Terrified, he believed he would be accused of taking their lives, so he chose not to call the police or emergency services, instead deciding to cover up the incident. Robert claimed he returned to the Codd's house, broke into the back door, and took blankets from the bedroom to move the bodies, which he wasn't sure were deceased. He wrapped the bodies, placed them in the bed of his pickup, and drove them to his home, where he dismembered them in his own bathroom using a saw and a small axe. He then fired up his stove and began incrementally throwing pieces of his friends' bodies into the fire, hoping they would burn completely. The blood-soaked clothing, blankets, and footwear of the deceased he oddly chose not to burn, but instead packed into a trash bag and disposed of in a dumpster, assuming that once the trash was taken to the landfill, no one would be able to find anything. After all this, Robert claimed he decided to stage a burglary, though in reality, he had robbed his friend's home himself, stealing money and valuables, which he pawned the next day. Unsolved crime. The cruelty with which Robert disposed of his friends' bodies and the eerie calmness with which he recounted the events shocked even seasoned police officers. In his home, they found a saw and an axe stained with blood, skin, and bone fragments of the deceased. The accused hadn't even bothered to clean the tools or attempt to hide them, confident that the investigation would never lead to him, since he had left no traces at the Codd's house. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bone fragments found in Owens's stove belonged to the missing couple. Law enforcement decided to delve deeper into the suspect's background. Robert was unmarried, had no children, and barely maintained any contact with his relatives. He had previously lived in Asheville, North Carolina, but in 2000, he bought land in Leicester and later built a house there. It turned out that his name was linked to an unresolved crime from 15 years prior that occurred in Asheville. In 2000, Robert's close friend, Zeb Wayne Quinn, who was only 18 at the time, mysteriously disappeared. Robert and Zeb had known each other since school, lived nearby, and were friends. Zeb was undergoing military training and also worked part-time at Walmart. On January 2nd, 2000, after finishing his shift, Quinn met with Robert, planning to drive to Leicester to buy a new car, but he never returned home. A few days later, his Mazda protege was found in another part of town, parked with its headlights on. Inside, a heart was drawn on the window with red lipstick. The car's owner was never found. The car also had damage and scratches with traces of paint from another vehicle. The last person to see Zeb was Robert, whose car also had damage, and it turned out that the scratches contained paint particles from Zeb's car. Robert told a peculiar and implausible story. Shortly after they headed towards Leicester, Zeb blinked at him to stop. Zeb said he received a message on his pager and urgently needed to use a payphone. He asked Robert to wait and drove off to the nearest gas station, but returned 10 minutes later, looking frantic. Said their plans had changed, and then drove off in an unknown direction, hitting his friend's car in the process. It was also discovered that Zeb had a romantic relationship with a woman named Misty Taylor, whose former boyfriend, Wesley Smith, had threatened Zeb with harm if he didn't stop seeing Misty. Taylor, Smith, and Owens were questioned in this case, but due to a lack of evidence, all three were released. Additionally, Misty and Wesley had alibis, which was not the case for Robert. A significant amount of money, which Zeb had with him in case he decided to buy the car, and his pager disappeared from his car, and it was never determined what message he had received, if any. The investigation leaned towards the theory that there was no message at all. Another oddity was that the day after Zeb's disappearance, a man called Walmart claiming to be him, stating he wouldn't be coming to work for the next few days due to illness. However, the colleague who answered the call thought the voice sounded strange and unfamiliar, not like Zeb at all. That phone call was traced to a Volvo plant where Robert worked. During questioning, Owens unexpectedly claimed that he made the call at his friend's request the night before Zeb sped away. No new evidence or witnesses were found, and the case remained unsolved, with Zeb Quinn listed as missing ever since. However, 15 years after these events, Owens was interrogated again, suspected of being directly involved in his longtime friend's disappearance. New unexpected details of an old case. In June 2015, the case of Zeb Quinn was reopened from the archives, and the investigation resumed. However, at first, it seemed unlikely that law enforcement would uncover any new information. Robert recounted the same story he had told back in 2000, indicating he had nothing new to add. Nevertheless, the police decided to conduct a more thorough search of his property, where they stumbled upon something very peculiar. In a detached concrete slab at Owens's home, a strangely walled-off cavity was discovered, inside which were small, heavily charred human bone fragments. Unfortunately, the remains were too damaged to undergo DNA analysis, so it was impossible to definitively determine if they belonged to the missing Quinn. A neighbor's interview provided even more unexpected results. An elderly man living nearby remembered something from January 2000, when young Owens had just purchased the land and was starting to build his house. One evening, he started a fire that emitted a sickly, sweet, nauseating smell. The neighbor even confronted him because the wind was blowing the stench in his direction, nearly making him sick. Soon after, the fire pit was covered with concrete, which seemed highly unusual, but Robert claimed he planned to build a small fountain there, which he never did. The neighbor had forgotten about the foul-smelling fire until 15 years later when police showed up at the property. Ultimately, Owens confessed to being complicit in a crime, telling an entirely new story. According to him, Zeb was killed by his own uncle, Walter Owens, who had been hired by Wesley Smith to eliminate Misty's new boyfriend, whom he still loved. Robert claimed he was unaware at the time, and his uncle had asked him to lure the young man to a secluded spot. When the three of them ended up in a wooded area on the road to Leicester, the uncle ordered them to stop the car and then to signal Quinn to do the same. Once the young man stepped out, Walter shot him silently and then instructed his nephew to help dismember and package the body. which was burned on Robert's property that same night and encased in concrete. Interrogating Walter Owens was no longer possible, as he had died several years before his nephew's horrific confession. No evidence was found at the supposed crime scene, and the story sounded very unconvincing. Legal proceedings, plea agreement, and final verdict. Initially, Robert faced charges of first-degree double murder, murder of an unborn child, dismemberment and concealment of evidence, burglary, and robbery. All these charges could have led to the death penalty, but it was revealed that the defendant had long suffered from depression and mental disorders, taking powerful medication, which his lawyer used as a foundation for defense. Thanks to a well-constructed defense strategy, the accused could have been found insane and sent to a psychiatric clinic instead of prison, which neither the prosecution nor the victim's relatives found satisfactory. At the same time, the investigation into Quinn's case began, from which the criminal might also escape unpunished. In 2017, the defendant agreed to a plea deal, admitting guilt in the murder of the Codds in exchange for a guaranteed removal of the death penalty from potential sentences. For this case, he was found guilty of second-degree manslaughter, dismemberment and incineration of bodies, burglary, and robbery. In total, he was sentenced to 59 years in prison. In 2022, Owens made another plea deal with the authorities, this time regarding Quinn's case. However, he only admitted to complicity in murder and assisting in hiding the evidence. For this crime, he received an additional 12 years, added to his already effectively life sentence. After the sentencing, the murderer addressed the court, asking forgiveness from the relatives of the people he had killed. He again spoke of his innocence, attributing everything to an unfortunate accident and citing his mental disorder and the influence of strong medication, which impaired his judgment. However, the relatives of Christy and Joseph Codd, as well as Quinn's family, did not believe him. They have never reconciled with the term unintentional murder and believe that in both cases, the man acted deliberately and for selfish motives.